We need like a little hi there, hello song. Like,
We need an intro.
we need an intro to my video. Okay, we'll work on that. That's the next assignment.
Yeah. Think of a creative music one.
Okay. I should have digital media do that.
Create an intro?
Yeah. Okay, we'll work on that. Next week, as you know, I am not going to be here. I know, you'll be very sad. But it'll be okay because I'm learning more stuff and then I'll come back and I'll teach it. But in the meantime, you know, life must go on. So you need to know how to do the music non-objective painting while I'm gone. You guys are going to have 4 work days next week. It's going to take you longer than that, so you're definitely not going to start and finish the project in those 4 days. But I need you to know more than 4 days worth of work so that just in case it goes faster than you anticipate, you know what you need to do, and that way you can keep working productively. That is the expectation, right? Work productively at all times, no excuses, okay? Second hour, and I came up with this list of procedures, and I'm going to kind of give you a rundown quickly through that. Most of these steps, maybe not most, but the major ones, were also demoed separately and pre-recorded last year. So I will link the demos that I have pre-recorded onto your YouTube playlist for your class. So if there's a question that, for example, somebody who has done the project can't answer, or if you want to see it first before you do it, you don't just want to take my word for it, which is better education, right? Then those videos will be available for you. I don't think they're very long. I think they're little short ones. But just so that you can see it done a little bit more than just how we're going to talk through it now, they will be available for you, okay? Starting at the top, okay, you will, today and tomorrow, you will finish your 4 music analysis sheets for your 4 different songs. Then you're going to pick a song. It could be one of those 4, or if you want to go back and do another one, you can. And then on whatever song you pick, you are going to complete 5 thumbnails. Okay? The thumbnails are going to use all the different parts, and they're going to combine them into the visual, like we talked about and we demoed on the board yesterday. And do your thumbnails in color. Okay? They don't have to be super detailed. They don't have to have tons of highlights and shadows. They do need to be non-objective, okay? And already today I saw several thumbnails that are starting to get mountain shapes and sky swirls and tree shapes. So remember, take that out of your head, right? We want to kind of steer yourself back to non-objective stuff. So if you're starting to get imagery as you hear the music, you might want to pick a different song that isn't going to be a temptation for you, okay? Just because I know that that's really tough. Once you kind of start to see those mental images, it's tough to totally block them out completely and stay non-objective, particularly if you haven't done it before, if it's new for you. Okay, so you got lots of musical options, so you should be able to find something that works.
Are our thumbnails, like, do we do each thumbnail like for a different song, or is it just like one song but 5 different sections from that music analysis?
Good question. One song, 5 different musical interpretations.
Okay.
Because you're going to, once you get your music analysis done, then you're going to take that information, put it into a thumbnail, and then you're going to try different variations of it to see what's going to balance the best and what you can connect back to the song the best. Great question. My nose is so itchy today. Once you do that, okay, and you need to do your thumbnails either today or tomorrow because you have to check them in with me by tomorrow, so that way I know that you are on the right track and I know that you have the visual information that you need to create a strong project, okay? I don't just want to like abandon you and be like, yeah, figure it out on your own, right? That's not very good. So that's why I want to make sure that I can check in those thumbnails for you by tomorrow so that I can get them in the grade book, and then I know that you're good to go for next week, okay? After you do that, then you're going to follow these steps, okay? And as much as I possibly can, I will either leave them up there or I will translate them to a printed sheet of paper that you can have starting next week, okay? The first thing you're going to do is you're going to select and cut your masonite board. Okay? So if you direct your attention over there, that was a good head shift, everybody. In the open tippy top cabinet, see the brown boards? Okay? That's what you're going to use for this project. So masonite, this is a teeny tiny little sample. Masonite looks like this. It's like a compressed fiber board. Okay? The reason we're using masonite and not like a normal canvas board that we would normally use is because masonite is going to control the warping a little bit better than the regular canvas boards will. Okay? Regular canvas boards are just going to warp like crazy if we try to do this project on them. Okay? So that's number one. The regular size that you're going to get out of the cabinet is going to be 16 by 20, which is the size of this one. Okay? So if you just want your board to be as it comes in its normal, see the masonite board on the back? So if you just want it to be that size, then you have no extra work for cutting your composition or cutting your board. You can just work with it the size that it comes out of the cabinet. Okay? You can do it vertically, you can do it horizontally, however you want to make that work. However works best for your song would be your stronger choice. Okay? So that's what you're going to do with that. If you want to cut it, okay, for example, like we talked about in the PowerPoint, if you want to make a diptych or a triptych, or if you want to make a cluster, or if you want a different size, or not a different size necessarily, but a different dimension. So if instead of a rectangle, you want to have it be a square, that fits better with your song. I will put a jigsaw in here tomorrow, and I will leave it here for next week. Jigsaw is like a power tool, right? And we'll put like the little wooden stools that you can kind of brace your board on like a sawhorse. And you can use a jigsaw, put some safety glasses there. There's a power outlet right there. Just sweep up the sawdust when you're done. And that's how you would cut the board if you needed to cut it into segments. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, you want to use about the same size equivalent of one 16 by 20 inch piece. So if you want to cut that into like a bunch of little pieces and work on them all, you can. If you want to cut it into 2 pieces, you can. If you want to leave it as 1, you can do that also. Does that make sense? Questions on that first step? Okay, good. Step number 2, you are going to coat your board with watered down Elmer's glue on both sides. Okay? Very angry underlines right here. That means serious business. So why would we want to take a board right out of the cabinet in its like natural empty state and coat it with glue on both sides? What purpose would that serve? To eliminate or minimize the warping. Yes, exactly. So do you guys know how and why a wooden board like that would warp in the first place? You know why that happens? It has to do with the moisture. Yep. So if you think like sponges do this too, if you think like those kitchen sponges that when they're dry, they're like rock hard, right? If you wet one side of that sponge, or if we wet one side of the board, which once we start gluing stuff on is going to happen, right? The board is porous, so it's going to start absorbing that moisture. Well, what's going to happen to the sponge or to the board when it absorbs the moisture? It gets bigger. Right? The moisture's got to go somewhere. It's absorbing it into the fibers of the board. So if only one side of that board is absorbing moisture, only one side of it is going to swell or get bigger. So as that one side swells, the other side is not swelling and the other side is going to stay consistent, and that's where you get that curving happening. Okay? So if we take that watered down glue solution and we wet both sides, they're both going to swell evenly, and then as that glue solution dries, hopefully it's going to seal off some of those pores while it's in its evenly swollen state, so that would hopefully minimize any future swelling and warpage as you add more moisture. Okay, I'm using the word minimize. It's not going to eliminate it entirely. And it's certainly going to depend on how thick that glue solution is and how even it is, and a number of other variable factors that, you know, we're humans and we're not going to be able to control perfectly anyway. Okay, but that's the first thing that you're going to want to do. It is not a good idea to start and select your board at the beginning of the hour and then coat it with glue solution at the beginning of the hour, because then what's going to happen? You're going to like watch it dry for the rest of the hour, and that's not productive or fun. Okay, so what would really help would be if you finished your thumbnails today or tomorrow, you could do the beginning steps of prepping that board by the end of class tomorrow, or do your thumbnails during class, and then during ELT is a really good time for you to come in and coat your board. That way, come the next day, you know, it has overnight to dry, or in this case, over the weekend, and then you'd be able to start the next step the next time in class. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. A word or two about the glue, okay? Turn your attention back there. The cabinet that has the mirror on it, right behind Jacob, that's where the glue is, okay? There are bottles of glue in there, but you shouldn't really need those all that much. There are big, like, jugs of glue, like gallon-sized glue bottles in the top of that cabinet, okay? Some of those bottles are watered-down glue, and some of them are just straight 100% not watered down glue, okay? I'm gonna leave it to you to figure out which one is which, because you're all intelligent and you can do that, okay? But I'm making a point to tell you that because I know that's been an issue, like earlier in the year when people just grab something to fill up a glue bottle with, and then all of a sudden they're like, why is this glue bottle super runny? Well, you probably grabbed watered down glue instead of full strength glue. Does that make sense? Okay? To use that watered down glue, you can grab a cup from under the sink, like a water cup. You can just pour it in there. Use the glue brushes. Okay, don't use your regular paint brushes on anything glue. Use glue brushes. Glue brushes are in the cabinet kind of above the elephant. You guys see where I'm pointing? Okay. And then when you're done with that glue solution, you can pour what's left back into that gallon bottle because you'll have lots of extra. Does that make sense? Okay. If for some reason you run out of watered down glue, hi, thank you, then you can make new watered down glue, right, with concentrated glue and water. Easy. Okay? I'm counting on you to just take care of whatever you need to take care of. Okay? Figure if I give you the tools, you can handle it, right? So that is step 2. Coat the board with watered down Elmer's glue on both sides. Then, after your board is coated, okay, normally we put our board in one of 2 places, either on the drying rack or in your cubby, okay? I'm going to ask you as much as possible, please help me out, clear out your cubby so that you can keep your projects in your cubbies, okay? 2 reasons. First of all, there are like 50 of you, right, and there's only 1 drying rack between the 2 classes, so that gets kind of overwhelming. And 2, you can kind of see that the drying rack's already kind of full because my adaptive art classes, they have no cubbies. They have nowhere else to put their projects, so they've been kind of using that space. And they are a little bit tougher to control as far as like what they touch, what their projects spill over onto, and I wouldn't want something to happen to your project accidentally. Okay, so you can use the drying rack, but I would greatly prefer that you just cleaned up your cubby and your project's going to be much safer in there. Make sense? Okay, questions so far? Good. Moving along. After you use the watered down Elmer's on both sides and it dries, okay, then step 3 is to sculpt your relief surface. Remember we talked about relief paintings. And that's going to be using either paper towels or cardboard or something of that nature, okay? This is what I need to re-glue because this one fell off when I dropped it last hour. The idea here is you're going to use your thumbnail, so whatever your thumbnail design looks like, and you're going to figure out in that thumbnail which areas need to be taller, right, and which areas need to be shorter, and how that's going to transition between those different heights surfaces, okay? So for example, this is like a really tight rolled paper towel. This is a looser rolled paper towel, okay? Both of these are just hot glued down to this masonite. We didn't even use Elmer's, we just used hot glue because it's quicker, okay? The hot glue guns, by the way, that cabinet over there right behind this Jacob, the cabinet says adhesives on it. There's a whole bin of hot glue guns and hot glue sticks, and there are outlets by all of the sinks, and then there's 2 from the ceiling. And if you want to take like a triple tap or something out of the rolly room to split cords, you can do that so that multiples can plug in. There's also outlets all the way down under the counter on this side of the room. So if you like look under the counter and look up, there's outlets under there. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Not everybody's awake. That's why we're playing video, recording video. All right. You can make little cardboard fences like that if you want. There is cardboard behind the rolly room door. Okay, it's going to get a little out of control. Just do a good job at kind of keeping it wrangled in there. And then if you wanted to like tear your cardboard so that it exposes like the little corrugated part, you could use that as one of your textures or however you want it as well. Okay, so any sort of surface that you can kind of get your hands on and manipulate and sculpt is fair game if that's going to help you tell the story of, not the story, but the analysis of your music. Questions on that? Okay, good. So that is step number 3. Step number 4, once you do that, you're going to use toilet paper to cover your surface. Okay, and in the demo, I did this little corner with 1 sheet of toilet paper. That's obviously not going to be enough. You're going to have at least probably 3 or 4 layers of toilet paper by the time you get done. And your toilet paper, the key with that is that it needs to really be tucked in really well to all the little nooks and crannies. Okay, so if I go like from this cardboard piece and it goes down all the way, there's masonite down there still exposed, and then it goes back up onto this little paper towel roll, I would want to make sure that I use that glue brush to really dig in and tap in the toilet paper into all those little nooks and crannies so that I still get all of those surfaces. Okay? One of the worst things that you can do to kind of screw up your project is to blanket the toilet paper across like a hammock where it's like stretched from one surface to the other, because then when it dries, that's going to crack. And then you're going to have like weird craters and crevices and it's going to be all like cracky. Plus it's going to hide all the detail that you spent all your time sculpting. Okay, so you really want to make sure that the toilet paper gets into all those surfaces. If you want the wrinkles to be different than what the toilet paper kind of naturally does, some people in the past have asked if they could use newspaper instead, like paper mache. Yes, you sure can. Your wrinkles are going to be a little bit stronger. They're going to be more pronounced. So if you've got differences in texture in your song that you need to portray, you could use different surfaces like newspaper instead. Does that make sense? Okay. If you wanted to do something even stronger or even more coarse than newspaper, I have had people use like paper shopping bags, like grocery bags instead. That works too. Okay, did you have a question real quick?
I was going to ask if I could have the key so glaze right because I closed the door on accident.
Here you go. Thank you. You're welcome. Other questions on toilet paper? Okay. Number 5 is a really fun step. 5 is modeling paste, and that is optional. So if you are running behind, you can skip the modeling paste step if you want. In fact, if you just don't want to do modeling paste, you don't have to. It's not required. But people that do it usually really like it. So modeling paste is going to be in these buckets. Okay, and I labeled them. It says modeling paste very clearly. There are, in the cabinet back there, the same one above the elephant, there are some open buckets of this. So only open a new bucket if the previous bucket is empty. Okay. Modeling paste is like a really thick glue, like so thick that if you draw grooves in it, it stays. And that's the whole point of modeling paste, is that it's going to maintain that texture so you can actually sculpt with it. Okay. I have 2 new buckets of modeling paste plus whatever's in that partial, which is probably not a lot. So I'm going to ask you not to go all Jacob to Groot and the modeling paste and use like close to a whole bucket. Okay, he ended up buying his own because he liked it so much, and so much of his project became about that texture. What is a good amount that you could probably plan on using? Like like a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup worth if you were baking. Okay, it's not something that you have to do your whole surface with. You would use palette knives, which are also back there. Palette knives are like little spatulas and scraper type tools to sculpt your surface. I did a demo on this that I showed. I think I used this exact piece, in fact, in my demo. I scraped arches to get these ridges, and then to get this little like kind of prickly texture, I just like kind of tapped it on the surface and I let it form little peaks, kind of like when you bake with meringue. Okay. Like I said, you don't have to use modeling paste, but modeling paste is good if you need smaller, more controlled textures that are different than the toilet paper. Modeling paste is also good if you need smooth textures. So if you've got like a part of your song that has like a really smooth, long open area, lots of string instruments, something like that, then you might want little sections of smooth, then you can use modeling paste for that. Questions on that? You do not have to toilet paper over modeling paste. In fact, I wouldn't, because it's just going to cover all the texture you just made. Okay? That's number 5. Number 6 is apply thin gesso to your entire surface. And the gesso buckets look just like the modeling paste buckets, so that's why I labeled them. If you find buckets that are not labeled back there, just make sure you read the actual label. Gesso is going to be, anybody know what gesso is? It acts like, anybody know? Before we painted the musical set, what did we have to do to that surface?
Primer.
We had to prime it, right? We had that white primer over everything. So gesso is basically like a primer for your surface, okay? I'm not officially telling you this, but if you're behind on time, theoretically you could skip the gesso stage if you did a good job with your toilet papering with the glue, and if your surface is already like a good enough clean white on your toilet paper. If you use newspaper that has like a lot of ads or designs on it, you're not going to be able to skip your gesso, because you need that gesso. Gesso's white, like primer. It's going to provide a clean white base, but also more importantly, it's going to help seal your surface, and it's going to provide a paintable surface, so that paint's going to attach more easily and more evenly. Does that make sense? Okay. Gesso is another one where you want to make sure that you use, use the gesso brushes. Don't use your regular art brushes for gesso, because it's really hard on brushes. And then, I totally just lost my train of thought. Gesso. Gesso's not a good one to do at the beginning of the hour, because you're just going to have to coat it and then let it dry. Okay, so do gesso either at the very end of the hour or during ELT. Okay. You do not have to gesso the back, but if you're getting warping at all, it can't hurt. So feel free to if you want to. You do definitely have to at least gesso the edges. And the same goes when you do your toilet paper. Make sure that you toilet paper around your edges. So like this is a good example. See how the toilet paper doesn't go across the whole back, but it does go around the edges so that the edges are sealed. Okay, if you don't do that, it looks really like layery and kind of weird. It looks like puff pastry on the side, to be totally honest, if you don't do toilet paper all the way around. Okay? Questions so far?
Where are the gesso brushes?
Gesso brushes and glue brushes are in the cabinet above the elephant, and the palette knives are in there too. And those just get washed with soap and water, but they are very crunchy, so don't poke yourself with them. I've actually bled from poking myself with a glue brush because they dry, crunchy, they just get real sharp. So be careful. Okay. And then after you have your gesso on your whole surface and it's dry, then you're good to paint. Okay? So for the paint, you guys are going to use the paint on the cart with the pump tops. Okay? You do have to mix your colors. So there's primary colors there, red, yellow, blue. You're going to have to mix all your intermediates or tertiaries, all that kind of stuff. And then tomorrow, I will give you guys a packet of information that has different like background information on your color and color associations with it. So that's going to help you kind of fine tune your color choices. So for example, if you have a song that's really happy, okay, what color comes to mind? Yellow, okay? It's going to help you decide between yellow and orange and green and how that, like, how each color can convey those feelings a little bit differently. So you can kind of really fine tune on, or fine tune in what your song is actually conveying and what mood you actually want to convey with those colors. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Other questions? Okay. Just like we've talked about with oil pastel and with charcoal, you want to make sure your whole surface is activated, so you're going to be painting everything. You also want to use that dry brushing and that blending to avoid those flat areas of color. So again, these are good examples in kind of making that color rich. Particularly, like if you look at this area, this has paper towels underneath it, kind of like balled up in little areas. So there's darker colors down deeper in the crevices and in the shadow areas, and then there's lighter colors, more intense colors on the higher areas. So like if you are somebody that is familiar with makeup and contour, that's kind of part of the process. It's going to help accentuate that texture. And then dry brushing is going to help pop out the surface texture that's actually there. So where you've got paper towel, for example, if you dry brush over that, you're going to see like the little impressed like canvas looking texture in your paper towel. Or if you have wrinkles in your toilet paper, or if you're painting over a modeling pasted area. I don't think there are any on this one. But all of those areas of color are blended in really well with different variants of that color, so it's not flat anywhere. Does that make sense? Okay. What else do you need to know from me before next week?
Due date?
Due date, that's a really good question. I have no idea. Thumbnails for sure are due tomorrow, if not sooner. I would say at the very least, you should have your surface sculpted, step 3, and your toilet paper done by the time I get back. So that gives you 4 class periods next week, plus 1 class period tomorrow to do those steps. Okay, could you do it and should you do it faster than that? Probably. But let's say you change your mind a little bit in there, and that gives you a little bit of time to kind of work through that process. Okay, if it's taking you longer than that though, then you know you need to step it up or plan more time outside of class. That's a good question. Any others? All right. I will, like I said, I will link those videos in Google Classroom, and they'll be on your YouTube playlist. So if you need to watch the demos on each of those processes, they will be available for you also. All right. Who has thumbnails that I can check in?